Story 1. I'm a male teen currently working part-time and have my own income. I'm also the oldest in my family. I have 4 younger siblings, 2 big brothers who are on the spectrum, and 2 sisters who are biologically my cousins and were adopted by my parents as babies. Both have Down syndrome. All 4 of my younger siblings have significant challenges and health issues. Over the years, it has drained my parents' resources and left very little for anything fun. Only when I started working 2 years ago could I afford to treat myself occasionally. Sometimes it's my favorite gummies, sometimes I save up to buy something. I bought myself a laptop earlier this year with my money because I needed something, especially with school and everything, and using the family computer doesn't work as much now because Dad works later in the day than he used to. For the last few months, I've paid for certain groceries for myself since there are so many different meals made in our house, and I usually end up with stuff I didn't enjoy. I decided to occasionally buy stuff so I could make myself something I'd like, and it was one less person for my mom to prepare food for. My brothers both have safe foods, and my sisters are also bad eaters who have limitations due to allergies and not enjoying the taste of many things. I know my parents have been struggling to afford all the safe foods, allergen foods, and stuff for themselves. A while ago, my dad asked if I could buy some family groceries for everyone, and I sat and asked him if I could get more of what I like for everyone, and he said no. He and my mom don't like the foods I eat, and my siblings couldn't and wouldn't eat them. He said just get the usual stuff and I can live off stuff I don't love. I told him I didn't want to do that I was trying to enjoy food more, and it was one less person for them to buy for. We compromised, and I would buy myself groceries on the time instead of sometimes. Then a couple of weeks ago, some food ran out, and my dad had to use his credit card to buy a few extra groceries. I was the only person who didn't run out that week. My parents were angry. They asked why I took care of myself so much but wouldn't help out the family. Mom said it's exhausting having to feed so many different people with different needs, and I could at least buy food for my siblings if I can't give a crap about her and Dad. They said I was selfish, and I should be thinking of my family over just me. My parents said I would probably let everyone starve before I help out, and then they accused me of resenting them for adopting my sisters and adding more additional needs kids to our family. But they said that's what family does, and I should be ashamed. They also said I should never have bought the laptop and could have helped out more financially without it. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your parents are legally obligated to provide for you until you're 18, and they're not doing that. It sounds as though they were doing okay until you started earning money. You're already helping them out by paying for your own food. You've also provided your own laptop that your parents didn't have to pay for. When someone is drowning, the solution is not to drown with them, it's to find lifelines. There are programs that can help them. Your parents need to seek those out. Oh, you're not a parent. Don't let them turn you into one. The fact that you have to work outside your home just to feed yourself indicates that they're failing to meet your needs. It seems your needs are coming dead last. If they want more money, they can get a job that pays better or work more hours. If you start buying groceries, you will never get out of this. Even if you move out, they'll still ask for your help. Oh, sweetie, start saving your money so you can move out. Your parents bit off more than they can chew and need to reach out to the countless resources that are available to them. The best place to start is the caseworker. If I were you, I'd contact BCF myself and explain exactly what you said. Your family is struggling to make ends meet after adopting and pressuring you to provide. They won't be in trouble. They'll be provided resources and help for all of you. Also, you may want to hide your laptop. They sound very resentful about it, and I don't know what type of people they are. It's understandable that your family is struggling, but it isn't your struggle. Good luck. I have a nanny who comes to look after my little ones, a toddler and preschooler 3 times a week. She arrives in the morning when I leave for work at 8 o'clock a.m. and leaves with my husband or me when we get home at 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. She's been quite good with the kids, which is fine, but the only problem is she's making herself at home too much. The first problem is that she'll randomly leave things at our place overnight, such as a coat or car seat, etc. She'll also sometimes put small bits of food in our fridge and leave it overnight when she's coming the next day. But what irks me the most is the dogs. She has 2 dogs. One is a chocolate Labrador and the other is a Great Dane. I really don't like dogs. Originally, I said she couldn't bring them with her when she asked. One day, she had to bring them with her because her garden was being landscaped, so I let her but told her to keep them outside. Well, since then, she just kept bringing them. I didn't say anything since it wasn't that big of a deal and not worth the hassle. Incrementally, she's letting them get away with more and more. She first tied them up to the fence, and then she started letting them run free in the yard. Then one time it was raining, and she asked me if it was okay for them to come into the house for a bit and just stay in the kitchen. And now they're just let free rein. It's in the terms of the dogs that she's making herself too much at home. I find random chewed up tennis balls in the yard, and she set up a couple of metal bowls near the back door. The other day, I found a bag of dog treats in the pantry that I'm assuming is hers. Probably the worst of all is that she takes them out to do their business. I don't even want to think about all the dog do that would be in my yard and bags the poop. But then she leaves the poop by the front door next to her handbag and dog leashes, so I normally come home to a few of those bright green bags of her dog do at my front door. It's just so gross. I want to say something to her, but my husband tells me not to. He's saying that we need her to look after the kids and that it would come across as offensive to tell her that. He said it's just minor things and to not really worry about it. We only need her until the kids are school age anyway. He's quite serious, and we've been arguing over it quite a bit. Am I the idiot for telling her to stop making herself so much at home? I feel like she's just done it bit by bit so we didn't notice, but looking back, she's basically starting to slide into the household. Not the idiot. She's an idiot because you gave her an inch, and she took a marathon's worth of miles. She's taking advantage of you, and it's completely inappropriate as an employee. Let's look at this in terms of regular workplace etiquette. All workplaces will let you leave a jacket in your work area or a small amount of food in the fridge, so those are reasonable accommodations. Would an office allow dogs when it's been previously communicated that dogs aren't allowed? No. Making yourself comfortable is not a big deal, but bringing dogs is a no. You need to communicate that to her. She's utilizing your lack of limits to her advantage. If your husband won't listen, you might need to have a direct conversation with the nanny yourself. I'm a femme 32, currently 8 months pregnant with our first child. My husband and I, like a lot of couples, debrief after our work days. My husband works in a high-touch, high-interaction job, so we usually say our hellos, make dinner, and then eat separately so he can wind down a bit. Then afterward, we sit in the living room and chat. My wife, Polly 32, has mild neurodivergence, untreated ADHD, which means she tells, let's call it, branching stories. She'll get bogged down inside side stories, background stories, and details that add nothing to the core story about her workday. That's usually fine, but I've noticed it getting worse to the point that by the time she's done, it's time to watch a show and go to bed. I mean, I'm spending upwards of an hour just listening and adding and oh wow because she says she gets even more distracted when I ask questions. I brought this up with Polly, and she said that I'm asking her to mask her disorder, and that's just how her brain works. I get that feeling, but I'm starting to feel like I'm a side character here because she takes up all the airtime we set aside to debrief. Here's why I might be an idiot. I said, well, we all change our communication styles based on context, right? And she said that's different and that masking is not code switching. I just want some time to talk about my day too, but I don't want her to feel bad. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. There's no reason why you guys can't take turns telling the day stories. Also, you say she's untreated. Well, she needs to get treated. It sounds a lot like your wife really enjoys when other people accommodate her divergent behaviors, but really hates having to manage them to adapt to the more typical behavior of others. She has to give you some path forward that's not essentially you just need to deal with my crap. My mom does this constantly. Is this a neurodiverse symptom? I don't think wanting to share your life with her is expecting her to mask. This may not work with your wife, but I tell my mother I'm losing the thread of her story, so can she get back to the main path? Another thing I do is time box her. I let her know I have 30 minutes to talk when I call her. Yes, she does 99.98% of the talking, and that's fine. But at the 25-minute mark, I interrupt her and tell her I only have 5 minutes left. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. Get to the point, people. You're not asking her to mask anything. You're asking her to work on her disorder to make things easier. You're not trying to get her to pretend she doesn't have the disorder, not asking her to lie about it, and not asking her to hide it. You're asking her to try different things to curb it, like my family members counting to 3 when they were about to lose their temper, or asking a person with memory issues due to PTSD to write themselves notes. Learning how to participate in society is okay. Story 4. I have a sister, Jane, who is a single mother to her autistic son, James. James was having a hard time at his school. His school district is severely underfunded, and they do not give a crap. The schools where I live are pretty nice, and my neighbors who have kids said that they have a lot of great programs for kids like him. Since I had extra money, I decided to offer to let Jane and James move in with me so he could go to school here. Since he started, he's been doing great here. The teachers and aides are much more engaged than at his old school. They've been helping him work through some of his behaviors as well. While my other sister, Leah, is being weird about it though. The school that James attends has better teachers and aides and has a lot of other activities and resources, and in general, it's just a lot nicer. Leah and her family live in the same town that Jane and James used to live in, so her kids go to the underfunded school. Now she wants to send her kids to school here too. However, they're not taking any out-of-town students, so Lee wants to use my address and send her kids to school here. From what I've seen online, it looks like it can be considered fraud to do that. It's a fairly tight-knit community. People would figure out what we were doing and that they didn't live here. So I don't want to take the risk. Besides, Leah's kids aren't having trouble in school. Their school may not be the best, but they're doing okay. Still, Lee thinks it's unfair that I won't help her kids get out of the crappy school by using my address when I let Jane and James move in so that they can go to school here. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. There are ways to enrich children's educational development that don't involve fraud. Your sister needs to look into that. It's great of you to provide your nephew with special needs resources. He really needed you. You've shown kindness and support within your means, and it's okay to set boundaries to ensure the well-being of all involved. Jane and James moved in with you so he can legitimately attend school in your district. No fraud involved. Is it fair of Leah to pressure you to commit fraud, aka helping out so you have to lie and cheat to be fair to her kids? This is a false equivalency. Leah can get better schools for her kids like Jane did. Move into the district. It's fraud, and the last thing you want is to be held liable for your sister doing something shady. I highly suggest that if your sister is talking to you by phone over this, you text her your refusal to allow her to do this, and you keep a copy of that on the cloud so that you have proof that you said no to her suggestion. I'm telling you this because as much as I know you might not want to think this, your sister sounds like the type who would go ahead and use your address anyway. She sounds like the type who would falsify a utility bill or whatever to show residency there.
2 years after we got married, I still felt like we were just starting our journey together. It had been 2 years since we promised to be together forever, but my heart sank when my wife happily announced, "I'm going to have a baby." The father was my boss. I remembered her saying, "Let's wait to have kids. I want us to enjoy being newlyweds." When we first got married, my name's Ryan Kitchen, and I turned 30 this year. I married Susan 2 years ago after meeting her at work. Even though we worked in different parts of the company, I couldn't help but admire her beauty whenever we passed each other in the office or shared an elevator ride. When a coworker finally introduced us, my heart soared with joy. I'd always looked for chances to chat with Susan, and I wasn't going to miss this one. I watched all the movies and read the books she suggested. Slowly but surely, my efforts to get closer to her were paying off. At that time, it seemed Susan had a boyfriend, but I didn't pry too much into it. I was showing her that it didn't matter to me. Looking back, I'm amazed at how persistent I was. Susan decided to leave her job and become a stay-at-home wife, and I'm glad she's taking care of our home. She's taking cooking and flower arrangement classes, having relaxed lunches with friends, and enjoying a comfortable life. 2 years into our marriage, just when our parents started hinting about wanting grandchildren, something unbelievable happened. The busy overtime season was over, and I was feeling great, leaving work on time. Thinking that Susan might be feeling lonely because of my busy schedule, I decided to surprise her with her favorite cake on my way home for the upcoming long weekend. I thought we could go on a mini vacation together. I grabbed brochures of nearby tourist spots from a travel agency near the train station. To save her the trouble of cooking, I ordered takeout. I'm back. I managed to leave work early today, I told Susan as I took off my shoes at the front door. She hurried over from the hallway, looking surprised at my early return. While explaining about the takeout dinner, I handed her the cake she loves. However, something seemed wrong with Susan. "Susan, is everything all right?" I asked, handing her my suit jacket and noticing her small nod. Her expression was serious as we sat down in the living room. Susan took a seat across from me, and then she dropped the bombshell. "I'm pregnant, and I think we should end our marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Susan and I hadn't had any children yet. She was the one who had initially wanted to wait before starting a family right after our wedding. I had agreed to wait, wanting to respect her wishes to enjoy our early married life. We had been careful for the past 2 years, so how could she be pregnant now? "I want a divorce for the sake of the child," she said, a phrase I never expected to hear from her in such circumstances. I had always imagined using those words joyfully together. Susan's expression was blank, but her decision to divorce seemed final. "Please sign these papers. I want a divorce for our child," Susan said, laying out divorce papers already signed by her. Susan's parents had already signed the witness section of the divorce papers. She had talked to them beforehand. "I want to find out who the father is, but I can't lose my composure here. I have my dignity too," she explained. "So you're sure about this?" I asked, and Susan nodded firmly in response. After that, I struggled to keep the pen steady as I signed the papers. Susan neatly folded the divorce papers, indicating she had already packed her belongings. With a large suitcase in hand, she made her way to the door, leaving me speechless. I couldn't find the right words for Susan as she prepared to leave. She didn't look back at me. Her feelings for me were gone, evident from her expression. She disappeared into the fading light, dragging her suitcase behind her. All I could do was watch her leave. That night, I drank alone until I passed out. Waking up in the living room, I realized I had caught a cold. It wasn't just a hangover. I was plagued by headaches and chills. I called my workplace and said I needed a sick day to recover. Reflecting on last night, I wondered if it had all been a dream. But there sat the liquor bottle and the pen on the living room table, reminding me it wasn't a dream. Susan had really betrayed me and left. Reality hit me hard, and my chest ached with pain. It's true what they say, the harder they fall. I couldn't believe how much I now despised Susan, the woman I had once loved so deeply. Determined to find the other man, I spent the day searching through Susan's belongings. Despite my anger, I couldn't help but notice the ring and bracelet I had given her during our dating days still in the jewelry case. And then I found our wedding ring in the trash. What was she thinking when she threw it away? Just thinking about it made me feel sick. Despite spending the whole day looking for clues about the other man, I'd only succeeded in worsening my fever. Despite my efforts to keep busy, my health didn't fully recover in just one day. In the end, I ended up taking a week off from work to sort things out. When I finally returned, I was taken aback to find that my coworkers already knew about my divorce, even though I hadn't shared the news with them. "How are you holding up, Ryan? Seems like you're quite sensitive, getting sick over a divorce," remarked my direct boss, Tom Gary, with a smirk. Gary had always been a thorn in my side, constantly making things difficult for me with his pretentious attitude and questionable behavior. As I reluctantly tolerated his presence, it dawned on me that he had mentioned the divorce. Then it hit me. Before Susan and I got married, she and Gary used to work together in the same department. Didn't Susan inform you about the divorce? Or were you too busy nursing your fragile ego? He taunted, and suddenly everything clicked into place. "Are you the father of Susan's baby?" I asked through gritted teeth. Gary, with an air of superiority, confirmed it. "That's correct," he replied, clearly enjoying my discomfort. In that moment, I didn't fully comprehend the gravity of my actions. When I regained consciousness, Gary lay sprawled across the room, surrounded by a toppled chair and scattered desk items. My fist throbbed with a dull pain, a testament to the altercation. The scene resembled a chaotic festival, with some people assisting Gary while others attempted to restrain me. Despite being struck, Gary found amusement in the situation, laughing at the trouble I had unwittingly invited. He had manipulated me into losing control. Gary happened to be the grandson of the company's founder, making matters worse. By punching him, I had assaulted a future executive. Predictably, I was suspended and ultimately terminated from my job. Now, I was not only unemployed but also abandoned by my wife. My life spiraled into disarray. Though I knew I needed to find work to survive, my actions lagged behind my thoughts. Daytime became an excuse to drink, and nightfall brought more of the same. It was a self-destructive cycle, devoid of motivation. The only solace was my savings, a result of past diligence. After about a month, an unexpected visitor appeared. Initially, I pretended not to be home, ignoring the doorbell. However, it persisted, ringing again after 30 minutes, prompting another round of feigned absence. An hour later, the doorbell chimed once more, aggravating my already frayed nerves. Irritated, I grumbled about the intrusion as I begrudgingly answered the door. Standing before me was a stranger, a woman of unfamiliar stature, her gaze piercing into me with a judgmental intensity. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me, prompting me to shift my gaze away. "May I ask who you are?" I inquired tentatively. The woman, exuding an air of dignity and strength, wasted no time in getting to the point. "Are you the former spouse of that woman?" Her directness nearly caught me off guard, causing my heart to skip a beat. It was clear she was referring to Susan, and she didn't mince words. She introduced herself as Lillian Gary, confirming my suspicions about her relationship with Gary. The prying eyes of the neighborhood ladies passing by only added to my unease. I had always found their penchant for gossip unsettling. "Please come inside," I offered hastily, hoping to avoid further speculation. Lillian accepted the invitation graciously and stepped into the disarray of my home without hesitation. I hadn't made any effort to tidy up, but she didn't seem deterred. As we entered the cluttered living room, she silently began to gather the scattered debris. "I can handle that myself," I protested weakly, but she dismissed my objections. "We can't have a meaningful conversation amidst this chaos, can we? If you're not going to assist, please take a seat," she snapped, so I straightened up and settled onto the couch, watching in silence as she efficiently tidied up the room. "Why don't you freshen up?" she suggested. Her words caught me off guard, prompting me to hurry to the bathroom. I quickly washed my face, startled by the unfamiliar face staring back at me in the mirror. I shaved, washed, and combed my hair, feeling a semblance of normalcy return. For the first time in a while, I felt a bit more human. Returning to the living room, I found the cleaning already completed, with the trash bagged and placed in the hallway. "I used your kitchen," Lillian mentioned as she handed me a cup of tea. She seemed surprisingly capable for Gary's wife. "Thank you. I feel like myself again," I expressed, surprised by the sincerity of my gratitude. Lillian responded with a faint smile, though it quickly faded. "My husband asked for a divorce because he fathered a child," she stated bluntly, clearly not one to mince words. "I went through the same thing with my wife. I'm already divorced," I responded, indicating that it was no longer my concern. She let out a deep sigh, suggesting that Gary's indiscretions were nothing new to her. Apparently, he had previously settled a scandal involving Susan with money, leading her to immediately marry me as a sign of ending things with Gary. This time, Gary attempted to resolve matters with money again, but Susan refused to budge. From Lillian's tone, it was evident she still harbored feelings for Gary and desired to rid herself of Susan. "So, you want to reconcile with Gary instead of getting a divorce," I summarized, surprised that she could still have feelings for someone who had cheated on her twice with the same woman and had a child with her. Lillian appeared taken aback when I asked if she didn't want a divorce, as if the thought hadn't crossed her mind. "Do you believe it's possible to move forward from this?" I questioned, finding her expressions and demeanor intriguing. I awaited Lillian's response with anticipation. With a slight smile, she simply remarked, "We're still married after all." I'm not sure why, but her words left me feeling defeated. In the end, I asked Lillian to leave, agreeing to revisit the discussion another time. The day following Lily's visit, Gary paid me a visit. It appeared he had been informed by Lillian about her conversation with me the previous day. As a former superior, I'd ushered him into the living room. Gary glanced around the room and chuckled. "What's amusing?" I inquired. "Lillian's handiwork, isn't it?" Gary replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. I hadn't noticed, but it seemed Lillian's touch was evident in the tidiness of the room. The camaraderie between them grated on my nerves. When I questioned his reason for visiting, Gary disclosed that he had a favor to ask. He wanted me to persuade Lillian to divorce him. His request left me stunned. According to Gary, Lillian is unable to conceive, and he desires an heir. Susan's pregnancy presented a perfect opportunity for him. He offered me a bribe to persuade Lillian to agree to a divorce, placing a thick envelope on the table. The sight of him trying to resolve everything with money sickened me. "I want children, something Lillian can't provide," he stated, pushing my patience to its limit. I grabbed him by the collar, but he continued laughing, seemingly confident he wouldn't be struck again. Just as I prepared to swing my fist, a soft hand intercepted my raised arm. "Is my husband worth hitting?" Lillian's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room. "You left the front door wide open." "That's careless," she scolded me, causing me to release my grip on Gary. "Okay," I muttered, feeling the momentum drain from my confrontation. "So you desire a child." Lillian murmured, her gaze fixed on Gary, who nodded in agreement. From her back, she produced divorce papers. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked, offering the papers to Gary with a stunningly beautiful yet unsettling smile. As Gary accepted the papers, his fingers brushed lightly against her hand, leaving me with a sense of intrusion. I quickly averted my gaze, feeling as though I had witnessed something private. "Thank you," Gary muttered before swiftly exiting. "We're enemies now, aren't we, Gary?" Lillian waved without turning back, indicating that he had accepted her declaration of war. Once Gary disappeared from view, Lillian turned her attention back to me. "Shall we nurse our wounds together? But first, let's seek our revenge," she proposed. We both decided to separately demand compensation from Gary and Susan. Knowing their wealth, we anticipated they would comply with our demands regardless of the amount. I instructed my lawyer to handle all proceedings simultaneously, driven by my desire to see them suffer, even if just a little. This retaliation would be child's play, a small taste of payback. After making our demands, Susan finally appeared, tears streaming down her face. It seemed Gary would pay his share, but he refused to cover Susan's portion. While this was expected given their unmarried status, there seemed to be more to the situation. During a meeting involving the four of us, Gary attempted to shift blame onto me for Susan's infidelity, citing my busy work schedule as the cause of her loneliness. "You're quite the master of deception, aren't you? But your tricks won't work on me," I retorted. Lillian then produced a report from Gary's private investigation, commissioned by his parents. It revealed that Susan and Gary had been involved prior to my marriage to her, and Susan had accepted a settlement to end their relationship. However, their affair had continued clandestinely. Apparently, my marriage to Susan had been Gary's idea as a cover-up. My dedication to work and my somewhat insensitive nature made me an ideal husband for their purposes. Additionally, working alongside Gary provided them with a convenient means of monitoring me. The level of detail in the report compiled by Gary's parents, at significant expense, was astonishing. Lillian calmly read through the contents, causing Gary and Susan's faces to pale. Susan was the first to crack, her hysterical screams filling the room until they were cut short by tears. "Stop it now. It's not good for the baby if you stress yourself out." We reprimanded her, prompting Susan to flinch. Under the weight of Lillian's icy gaze, Susan fainted on the spot. Gary, in a panic, rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms. Lillian's smile hinted at her surrender. That's a pity. I believe Lillian truly loves Gary. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin. The deeper the love, the deeper the hate, she mused. It seemed Gary understood this too. In the end, I played no part in the discussion, as Lillian dominated the conversation. As the meeting concluded, Lillian laughed at me, saying, "That's it." Afterwards, news of my divorce spread throughout the workplace, as I had disclosed it to my colleagues. Despite the company's attempts to keep it under wraps, it was too late. Gary found himself sidelined at work and estranged from his family. Susan, now remarried, struggled with issues involving her in-laws. Gary's parents, who favored Lillian, treated Susan poorly, having driven Lillian away. Once all the alimony and other matters were settled, I invited Lillian for coffee. She shared her current situation, working at a friend's company while living independently. "I can't have children, so I need to be self-sufficient," she explained. Seeing her speak with such sincerity eased my fears. "I don't agree with your reason for independence," I admitted, surprising both of us with my firmness. I noticed she still wore her wedding ring, a reminder of Gary. Summoning my courage, I expressed my feelings, asking her to wait until I found a job. "I hope to become your partner," I confessed. Lillian seemed taken aback at first, but then chuckled, acknowledging her complexity. "I know I can be difficult," she admitted. "I'm well aware," I replied, gently tracing the back of her hand with my finger. It seemed she was letting go of her past as she removed her ring. Then she lightly touched my hand, her affectionate gesture filling me with warmth. "I'll make you happy, so please wait," Lillian explained, her laughter brimming with joy. In that moment, I vowed to protect her smile forever. As the video concluded, I reflected on our journey together, eager for the future. What did you think? Subscribing to the channel will encourage us to produce more. See you in the next video. Get out! My mother-in-law, Catherine's harsh words hit me like a cold wind when it was decided that my husband would be sent to work in another country. Catherine took our house away from me and my little girl. With no place to go, I ended up in the park, holding my 2-year-old daughter, feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, police officers surrounded us. "Please come with us to the station," they said as rain poured down, making me shiver from the cold. Reluctantly, I followed them to the police station. There, I was surprised to see someone unexpected waiting for me. "My name is Emma, and I'm turning 35 this year. I met my husband Bob at work, and after dating for a year, we got married. When we had our daughter Lily 2 years ago, I stopped working. Now, I live with Bob, Lily, and my mother-in-law, Catherine. We used to rent a place, but after Catherine's husband passed away and she started having trouble with her knees, we decided to live together and bought a new apartment. We thought it would be best to live somewhere with good transportation access because of Catherine's knees. Buying an apartment was cheaper than a house at the time, and it has an elevator, which makes life easier. Catherine also preferred the apartment, so we made a down payment and took out a 35-year loan. Bob's job often requires him to travel or relocate, but since we bought the apartment, we were told he wouldn't be transferred for a while. However, he travels for work more than other employees, about once a week to other states. Having a 2-year-old daughter, I feel really stressed when my husband Bob goes on his business trips. At first, my mother-in-law Catherine was helpful, but now she doesn't help with taking care of our daughter at all. Instead, she makes more work for me. For example, she eats and leaves her dirty dishes lying around, and she doesn't rinse cooking utensils after using them. I'm often busy with our daughter, so by the time I notice, the food is stuck to the dishes, making them hard to clean. Even when I ask her to at least rinse them, she just says sorry and promises to do better next time, but she doesn't. I notice that she rinses the dishes when my husband is around, but not when I'm alone. This made me think that Catherine is intentionally making things difficult for me. Sometimes, when she asks if I need anything from the store and I say no, she later tells me she actually needed something, which happens a lot. I used to try to help Catherine a lot because of her bad knees, but now I'm feeling less inclined to do so because of her behavior. I thought about talking to my husband Bob about it, but he's already stressed from work, so I didn't want to add to his worries. Catherine's behavior started soon after we moved in together, and it's been going on for years now. When I talked to a friend about it, she said it sounds like Catherine is bullying me and suggested I talk to Bob about it. But I worry that if I do, Catherine, who doesn't have any other family, might end up in a care facility. So I thought it might be better to just deal with it. However, one day, something happened that made me reconsider. That day, I planned to drop off my daughter Lily at my parents' house. They love having Lily over for sleepovers. Thanks for always bringing Lily. We love having her here. Why do you stay over sometimes too? My mom suggested. I'd love to, but I'm worried about leaving Catherine alone. I'll head home. Just don't spoil Lily with too many toys, I replied. After a nice chat, I left and headed back to our apartment where Catherine was waiting. When I got back, I realized I had forgotten my keys inside. At first, I was worried, but then I remembered Catherine was home. I tried calling her using the intercom, but there was no answer. Maybe she had gone out. I decided to wait outside for a while. But even after waiting for 2 hours until it got dark, Catherine didn't come back. When another resident returned and unlocked the main entrance, I followed them in. Catherine rarely goes out at night, so I was sure she was still at home. I rang the intercom again, but still no response. I could hear a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine was there. I tried a few more times, but she refused to answer. Feeling defeated, I decided to stay at a nearby motel for the night and planned to sort things out when my husband Bob returned from his trip. What happened? Out shopping. I told Bob that Catherine had locked me out. He was understandably upset for me, but Catherine just brushed it off, saying, "Oh, maybe I didn't hear you because of my hearing. I'm getting old, you know," with a smirk on her face. I was relieved to be back inside. After getting my keys, I went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. When I talked to my parents about what happened, they said, "Sounds like Catherine is making things difficult for you. If it gets too much, you can always come back here." Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away before heading home with Lily. For a while, things seemed okay with Catherine. But then, out of nowhere, Bob's international transfer became final. It was a permanent move, not just a short business trip. We finally bought a place, and now this international assignment. "What do you think?" Bob asked me. "I think it's best for you and Lily to stay in the US, I replied. But when he asked if I could handle living with my mom, I hesitated. Thinking about the potential stress it could cause Lily, I decided it would be better for us to stay in the US. After we made that decision, Bob had to leave for Europe. Although he was worried about us, he was really busy with work, so it was just me, Lily, and Catherine at home. But things quickly went downhill once Bob left for Europe. Catherine's attitude completely changed. On a stormy day when it wasn't safe to go outside, Catherine dropped a bombshell on me. "Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily move out?" she said. "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked, shocked. "Just what I said. I'll take over from here. I just feel I can't relax with strangers in the house. I'd appreciate it if you could leave right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Catherine's request felt like a slap in the face. Despite not being blood relatives, I had always treated her like family and tried my best to make our living situation comfortable. But to Catherine, it seemed like we were just unwanted guests. As I contemplated gathering our belongings and returning to my parents' place, Catherine uttered, "Instead of wasting time, why did you just leave?" Before I could react, Lily and I found ourselves standing outside, still in our everyday clothes, evicted from our own home. No matter how hard I knocked on the door, Catherine refused to let us back in. Lost and bewildered, I carried Lily through the pouring rain to a nearby park. Thankfully, there was a shelter there that provided some relief from the rain. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or gone back to my parents' house. But I had left my wallet and phone inside. Feeling helpless, I sat in the park, trying to figure out what to do next. Time seemed to blur as the rain continued to pour down. Exhausted and cold, I started to drift off to sleep despite the darkness and biting cold. I worried about Lily catching a cold. As terrible as it seemed, the only option I could think of was to walk to my parents' house, even though it would take 3 hours. As I sat there pondering our predicament, I noticed 2 faint lights in the distance coming closer. Due to the rain, it was hard to see clearly, but I could make out that they were from 2 police officers. I thought maybe they could offer some assistance, but before I could approach them, one of the officers called out to me. "Are you Emma? And is this little one Lily?" the officer asked. Surprised by their recognition, I weakly replied, "Yes, that's us." "Please come to the station with us," the officer said. "Why, the police station?" I asked, feeling puzzled. Wondering if something was wrong, Lily and I followed the officer's instructions and got into the patrol car. We were shivering from being out in the rain for so long, but the officers had brought large towels to help keep us warm. "You might need these. We've got some spare clothes back at the station for you," they said kindly. Curious about why they knew about us and why we were headed to the police station, I asked, "How did you know where to find us?" They replied, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon drifted off to sleep and woke up to find that we had arrived at the police station. Following the officers inside, I was surprised to see Catherine and my uncle waiting there. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" I asked, puzzled by his presence. "He was contacted by Bob," my uncle explained. "Bob suspected you might be having problems with his mom, and since he's overseas, he asked me to keep an eye on things for him." According to my uncle, Bob had talked to him about this issue previously. He said Bob had asked him to keep an eye on things because he couldn't be there himself. My uncle had seen us out in the rain earlier today. He had considered taking us in himself, but he thought Catherine's actions were extreme, so he decided to report it to the police. That's how the officers knew where to find us and came to help. Catherine had also been summoned to the police station. She sat on a sofa, glaring at me, appearing unaware of why she was there. "Why do I have to be here? My knee is bad, you know. If Bob was here, this wouldn't be happening," Catherine argued. But the whole situation stemmed from Bob asking my uncle for help. In discussions with the police, it seemed likely that there could be legal consequences. Therefore, I was advised to consider hiring a lawyer. That's an exaggeration. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else, Catherine defended herself. "Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and a little child out in pouring rain. That's unforgivable," my uncle defended us, asserting that I was the rightful owner of the house. "That's impossible. Bob is the head of the household. He's the rightful owner. Now that he's not here, it should be mine," Catherine argued. Catherine believed Bob was the owner, but she was mistaken. In fact, my uncle, who runs a real estate business, helped us get a great deal on a condo. Bob suggested putting the property under my name. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I'm grateful I listened to Bob's advice. Following my uncle's guidance, I decided to hire a lawyer. The lawyer explained that it would be difficult to remove Catherine from the house. Therefore, the best option might be to place her in a care facility. Upon hearing the lawyer's advice, I immediately called Bob to explain the situation. Bob hadn't realized the situation had escalated so much and said he wanted to return from Japan to discuss it properly. He also mentioned he was considering placing Catherine in a facility. Meanwhile, Catherine, oblivious to all this, was snacking on crackers casually at the police station. Since I couldn't return home with Catherine, I decided to stay with my parents until Bob returned. He would be back in a week, giving us time to think about our next steps. If Bob didn't support me, divorce seemed like the only option. I regretted not seeking advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe and was at the house with Catherine, so I moved back home from my parents' place. Bob had to return to Europe soon due to the urgency of his job. He could only stay in Japan for a few days, so we needed to discuss our next steps. I'd heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Bob asked. It's all lies. I haven't done anything. Emma's plotting something to evict me. Catherine stubbornly refused to admit any wrongdoing. She even accused me of scheming against her. Bob, who I expected to support me, seemed to want to consider Catherine's perspective. I understand. So do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? He asked. Evidence? Of course not, Catherine replied. I see. Emma, do you have any evidence? Bob turned to me. To be honest, I've been so busy with work, I haven't been able to keep an eye on things. I'm not sure who to believe, I admitted. I handed Bob something I had with me. What's this? He asked. It was a voice recorder I had been using. It contained recordings of Catherine's verbal abuse towards me, including the time she evicted us. When Bob played it, he heard Catherine saying hurtful things like, "Such a worthless wife. I wonder why he even married you." Hearing this, Catherine quickly began to defend herself. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time, but it was just this once. As Catherine claimed this, the voice recorder played more recorded verbal abuses, showing that it wasn't just a one-time thing. Bob's hand, holding the voice recorder, trembled with tension and anger. Meanwhile, Catherine looked guilty. Mom, what is this about? Bob asked, but Catherine remained silent. If you won't answer, then I assume this is all true. If so, I need to protect Emma and Lily. You understand that, right? Bob's anger was palpable, something I had never seen in him before. Catherine, seeing this side of Bob for the first time too, looked frightened and couldn't say a word. After several discussions before Bob's return to Europe, I made it clear that I couldn't continue living with Catherine. With Lily around, I couldn't risk another incident like the one before. Bob seemed to agree, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine strongly opposed the idea, making the discussions more complicated. Despite the opposition, I decided to sell the house. You can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place, I told Catherine. How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house. Catherine resisted the idea, but it was a difficult request to ignore. Lily and I had already decided to move to Europe. Bob regretted not being more present for his family and wanted to be there for us moving forward. Although I was hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us reassured me. Plus, Lily is only 2, and it would be beneficial for her to learn and grow in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only viable option. If we left it as it was, Catherine would have to cover the mortgage, but her fixed income wouldn't suffice. Given her future prospects, it was crucial for someone to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine refused to move into a facility voluntarily. So we had no choice but to arrange for her to be placed there forcefully. I'm sorry, but I have to head back to Europe. Could you handle any necessary procedures here? Bob asked before leaving. With the help of others, I managed to finalize Catherine's admission into the facility. The staff there kept me informed about her condition, but unfortunately, she wasn't doing well. It would be one thing if she were simply feeling down, but it seemed she was causing trouble for the staff and other residents. Before heading to Europe, I visited her to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out at me, accusing me of locking her up in the facility. She also complained to the staff about the food, comfort of the beds, and other residents' behavior, expressing frustration and dissatisfaction. When I apologized to the staff for Catherine's behavior, they were very understanding. It's okay, one of them assured me. We're used to dealing with this kind of behavior. Just leave it to us. We'll keep you updated, and if anything happens, we'll give you a call, so don't worry. Despite all the trouble Catherine caused me while we lived together, I couldn't help but feel concerned as I headed to Europe. When I arrived in Paris, Bob met me at the airport, and we went to the apartment we had rented. Rents in Paris are known to be higher than in Texas, But thanks to the housing allowance from Bob's company, we were lucky to find a spacious and affordable place. Living in Paris has been a delightful experience for me and Lily. Our neighbors are incredibly friendly, even though I'm still learning French. Recently, one neighbor shared wine and cheese with me, and I returned the favor with mac and cheese. I'm slowly learning French, and Lily is picking it up too. I've enrolled in a language school to improve further, where I've made friends with other Americans new to France. In the past, I had to constantly worry about Catherine back in the States, which often stopped me from fully enjoying outings with friends. But here in Paris, I can relax and enjoy leisurely lunches. My main concern now is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Most kids in France start kindergarten at 5, so I hope she learns enough French by then. Luckily, Lily seems to be learning quickly. Once Lily starts preschool, I'm considering getting a job. Bob is supportive of me staying at home, but being in Paris has made me want to explore new opportunities. I've made friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe who hinted there might be a job for me there. The cafe is popular among Americans and locals learning English, so it could be a great fit. While there may be challenges ahead, living in France has strengthened our family bonds. I feel more confident expressing myself, and I believe we'll face any challenges together as a family. Overall, I've never